Well, we turn now to the controversial execution overnight in Alabama.
At this time, the family is you all really need help. Talk about, the plea for help.
In order for a person to be convicted on complicity, they have to be involved in a plan or a scheme to kill.
Definitely an eerie feeling witnessing the execution. The room was very quiet. Woods seemed to be calm.
Information could be put in a courtroom so that a judge can review this information and decide whether a new...
And if you look at the people who are sitting on death row, it's 2 black men.
Ivy, to please just give him a chance to have a fair trial. He's had it hard enough. How? Because, he didn't do anything wrong.
How much do you think race played a role?
He pointed out one of the officers to be shot and bragged about the crime afterwards. The AG says Woods even...
One of 2 cop killers in the bloodiest day in Birmingham Police Department history has met his just fate.
What would you say to the families of the officers who died?
We are deeply, deeply sorry.
He cradled his infant grandchild for the first and final time. He picked up some food. He posed for family photographs that captured smiles as strained as the conversation. Then someone in charge said it was time. The center of attention, Nathaniel Woods, assured his heavy-hearted father that everything would be all right. "Dad, I love you," he said. "But when you all walk out this gate today, I'm gonna walk out with you all, but you all aren't going to know it." It was late afternoon on March 5, 2020, the overcast day chosen by the state of Alabama to be Mr. Woods' last. He had been convicted 15 years earlier in connection with the shooting slayings of 3 Birmingham police officers, and ever since had been christened Cop Slayer Nathaniel Woods. But Mr. Woods never took anyone's life. He was unarmed when the officers were gunned down while rushing into a cramped drug house to execute a warrant for his arrest on a misdemeanor. Alabama, one of 26 states where an accomplice can be sentenced to expiry, according to the American Civil Liberties Union, argued that Mr. Woods had intentionally lured the officers to their demise. It did not have to prove that he actually took anyone's life in seeking his conviction for capital slaughter. The Capital Punishment Information Center estimates that of the country's 1,458 executions between 1985 and 2018, 11 involved cases in which the defendant neither arranged nor committed slaughter. Even rarer are cases in which the person was unarmed and uninvolved in a violent act, such as a robbery. Cases like that of Mr. Woods, whose defenders say he had no foreknowledge of the violence to unfold and fled in terror as the bullets flew. Another end row inmate, Kerry Spencer, wrote a letter in support of Mr. Woods and said Nathaniel Woods is 100% innocent, adding that he knows this to be a fact because he's the man that shot and took the lives of all 3 of the officers. Mr. Woods, whose case is the subject of a new documentary by the New York Times, To Live and Die in Alabama, was a black man living in the black majority city of Birmingham. But only 2 of the dozen jurors hearing his case were black. The judge and the 2 prosecutors were white, as were the 3 victims. He was also a black man living in Alabama, a state with a history of racial injustice and a full embrace of capital punishment. It has the country's highest number of end row inmates per capita and is the only state that does not require jury unanimity in recommending execution. After brief deliberations, the jury had voted 10-2, demise. In the annals of capital punishment, Mr. Woods is not the most sympathetic figure. A drug dealer whose evasive actions led to 3 slayings, who taunted one of the widows in a letter, who refused to show compassion even at his sentencing. Still, just as jurors struggled with reading Mr. Woods' impassive facial expression, so too does the law struggle with measure of punishment. How could it be that armed man who took the lives of 3 officers continue to live, while the unarmed man who fled loses his life? Brian Stevenson, the executive director of the Equal Justice Initiative, a human rights organization based in Alabama, said that the tragedy is that people like Nathaniel Woods become victims of our indifference to injustice. He added that being in the wrong place at the wrong time doesn't make you someone who is evil. Time, said someone in charge. Dark-bearded but still boyish, his light frame dressed in his end-row whites, the condemned man looked back at his family. Then he disappeared behind the door held open just for him. Heavenly Woods, one of his sisters, said she can't get that last look out of her mind. It's just stuck, she said. It's just, just what was he thinking?
Well, we turn now to the controversial execution overnight in Alabama.
Result of the fact that Nathaniel Woods was not the shooter. And somehow or another that's been an objection. I found one of two cop killers in the bloodiest day in Birmingham Police Department history has met his just fate.
The path to 18th Street. On a hot afternoon getting hotter by the second, all that separated the hostility between Nathaniel Woods, a drug dealer, and Carlos Owen, a police officer, was a back screen door. Their fraught standoff on June 17, 2004 was unfolding at a one-story bare-bones apartment in the city's Ensley section. The surrounding empty lots and vacant storefronts told the familiar American story of steel and prosperity moving out and drugs and crime moving in. Mr. Woods was a clerk in a 24-hour drug operation run by his cousin Tyron Cooper, who went by Bubba. His job: collect the money and hand over the drugs. A good dude, Mr. Cooper said. Mr. Woods spent his early childhood in Tuscaloosa, nursing stray animals and teasing his younger sisters, Heavenly and Pamela, who still call him by his nickname, Quail. But they say the familial mirth all but ended when their parents split up, partly because their mother used beatings to keep them in line. Pamela Woods, their mother, said that she told the police if she can't whoop their ass, then they need to take them to jail or take her, because ain't no child going to run her house when she's getting up and going to work 2 jobs taking care of them. She also said that all she got was, "You mean, you hateful, you hurt us." But she disagreed and said, "No, I whipped them. If I abused them, they would have had marks." Mr. Woods left school after the 6th grade and eventually moved to Birmingham to live with his father, Nathaniel Woods Sr. He developed a knack for electronics, able to revive a worn-out television, as well as a knack for trouble, with the rest for burglary, reckless driving, and public drinking. He got a job driving a forklift at a Piggly Wiggly warehouse, where his father was a foreman, but it didn't stick. Now he was 28, with 3 children and a job selling drugs in an operation taking in $3,000 a day. His work partner and friend, Kerry Spencer, 23 years old, had followed a similar path. He too had left school, had worked at the Piggly Wiggly warehouse, and had young children. But he was also snorting $350 worth of cocaine a day and was usually armed. This wasn't warehouse work after all. Just 2 months earlier, in April 2004, their boss, Mr. Cooper, had helped set a Birmingham corner aglow with gunfire during a dispute that left 2 people wounded. He was arrested a short while later in his bullet-riddled white Buick. For all the drugs and bullets, life at the 18th Street apartment passed without police interruption. Mr. Spencer would later testify. "Everyone around us was getting busted, but we never got touched," he would say. Except the police were now at the back door.
At this time, the family is you all really need help. Talk about, the police for.
In order for a person to be convicted on complicity, they have to be involved in a plan or a scheme to kill.
To take a look into this case, there are so many inconsistencies with the case.
Absolutely not. He was terrified when they came into the house.
And the actual shooter has stated this multiple times. How? Because, he didn't do anything wrong.
How much do you think race played a role in?
Curly and RoboCop. Officer Carlos Owen, 58 years old, was a Birmingham Police Department fixture assigned to patrol the Ensley streets he knew so well. Though he was a graying grandfather with plans to retire in 2 years, everyone called him by a nickname based on an old hairstyle, Curly. In his 26 years on the job, he had been shot at 3 times, bitten by a dog once, and involved in too many chases to remember. He had led the police union and been repeatedly honored for his police work, including as Officer of the Year in 2002. Bill Lowe, an Ensley business owner, told that he epitomized the community policing idea and that he knew where the good guys were and where the bad guys were. Others praised Officer Owen as strict but fair. Lou Chapman, 60 years old, a self-described former drug dealer, said that he was good to him and that a couple of times he could have taken him to jail. And even if he had to take one to jail, he would pull over and let them get rid of everything on them. Looming beside Officer Owen at the back door was Officer Hanley Chisholm III, a few days short of his 41st birthday. His on-the-job enthusiasm, coupled with 6'4" frame and wraparound sunglasses, had earned a 6-year police veteran and former Marine a nickname of his own, RoboCop. One of his sisters, Star Chisholm Sidelinker, said Harley knew when to police from the book and when to police from his heart. He chose to work in one of the badass areas to help make it a better place for the community. Officer Chisholm had been both honored and disciplined for his police work. In 2002, a year after being named the West Precinct's Officer of the Year, he was suspended after admitting to opening a woman's car trunk, dousing some baby clothes with beer from bottles he had broken, and destroying a television set in the vehicle with a knife. Curly and RoboCop, the patrolling guardians of Ensley. Some in the neighborhood respected them, some feared them, and some, including Mr. Wood's employer and cousin, Bubba Cooper, considered them corrupt. In a 2012 affidavit, and again in an interview this summer with The Times, Mr. Cooper claimed to have paid protection money to Officers Owen and Chisholm for years, with weekly payoffs of as much as $1,000, usually made at a local steakhouse called Nicky's West. In return, he said, they suppress local competition and tip him off to buy and bust operations of narcotics officers. He said that's how he was able to operate so long. But Mr. Cooper said that he was arrested on attempted slaughter charges in connection with that shooting spree in April 2004. The 2 officers raised their price to $3,000 a week. At that point, he said, he stopped paying them for protection. Others who live in Ensley, including some involved in the drug trade at the time, told similar stories about the 2 officers. But neither man was ever formally accused of corruption, according to Anita Nunn, the police chief at the time, so she asked where was the proof. Mr. Owen's daughter, Andrea Elders, dismissed the allegations against her father, who she said used to deliver bicycles to disadvantaged children in Ensley, as untruths concocted after his demise by local criminals.
And still to this day, we have him in this prison.
Definitely an eerie feeling witnessing the execution. The room was very quiet. Wood seemed to be calm.
I urged everyone to go to SaveNight.com because the full report is there.
What would you say to the families of the officers who died?
We are deeply, deeply sorry.
He pointed out one of the officers to be shot and bragged about the crime afterwards. The AG says Woods even
execute him today and find out tomorrow that he's innocent, then what?
Advocates have maintained his innocence because he was not. And Carlos Owen, all the attention this case has attracted this week has been traumatic.
A burst of violence. The screen door standoff was the culmination of escalating tensions that day at the 18th Street apartment. There had already been one previous encounter, if not 2. Mr. Spencer and Mr. Woods later claimed that Officer Owen first appeared at the apartment around dawn, pulling up in his truck on his way to the West Precinct building a half-mile away. Police records indicate that he reported to work at 6:30 that morning. They said that he kicked at the door, demanding to talk to Bubba before finally leaving. But this account could not be verified, and another witness later testified that neither Mr. Woods nor Mr. Spencer was at the apartment early that morning, though she said someone later told her that Officer Owen had indeed stopped by. There is no question that Officers Owen and Chisholm arrived at the apartment around 10:30 that morning to check on stolen cars, they said, and that they got into a heated argument with Mr. Woods and Mr. Spencer. The two sides swapped obscenities and threats that centered on hiding behind a badge and hiding behind the door. It wasn't a friendly conversation, Mr. Spencer later testified. At some point, Officer Owen briefly removed his badge. At some point, Mr. Woods gave his name because his defenders say he believed he had done nothing wrong. Before the officers left the scene, they used the patrol car computer of Officer Michael Collins, who had arrived in the midst of the confrontation, to run Mr. Woods' name through criminal databases. The drug dealers, meanwhile, began hiding their paraphernalia in anticipation. Mr. Spencer said that he then took a pill, drank a Bud Light, and went to sleep. Beside him, a semi-automatic rifle he had recently acquired in exchange for $35, a handgun, and a half-gram of cocaine. Less than 3 hours later, the police received confirmation by phone that Mr. Woods was wanted in nearby Fairfield on a misdemeanor attack charge related to a 4-month-old domestic disturbance, eliciting a woohoo from Officer Chisholm. This time, 4 police officers pulled up the 18th Street apartment. Mr. Owen, Mr. Chisholm, Mr. Collins, and Charles Robert Bennett. Now, Officer Owen was at the back door again, telling Mr. Woods through the screen that there was an outstanding warrant for his arrest and to come outside. Mr. Woods profanely refused. When Officer Chisholm was summoned from the front yard to confirm the warrant's existence, Officer Collins later said Mr. Woods cursed again and ran deeper into the small apartment where the covered windows cast the drug house clutter in eternal dusk. Officer Chisholm rushed in after him, followed by Officers Owen and Collins. Some of what happened next is in dispute, whether the police used pepper spray, whether the police drew their guns. But there is no doubt of the sudden explosion of violence that followed, detailed by Mr. Spencer in a cell phone video recorded from End Row last year. He said that he woke up to commotion, looked out a window to see a police car, and then saw Mr. Woods stumbling out of the kitchen, holding his face as if in pain, perhaps from pepper spray. Then, seeing movement, he opened fire with his semi-auto, taking the lives of Officers Chisholm and Owen. One bullet nicked Officer Collins as he fled out the back door. Mr. Woods later told the police that he was in complete shock, and as he was hollering, telling him to stop, stop, stop. Then Officer Bennett, 33 and married with a 4-year-old daughter, came through the front door, and Mr. Spencer said he hit him like 3 times. Mr. Woods scrambled out of the bathroom window and started to flee, passing Officer Bennett lying on the ground. Mr. Woods told the police that he heard him say he had been hit, but he kept running. Mr. Spencer said he went to the back door and sprayed a patrol car with bullets to scare off Officer Collins. As he ran out of the front door, he sensed that the gravely wounded Officer Bennett was trying to grab his leg. He shot him in the head. An anxious but determined manhunt followed, with crouched officers searching alleys and houses with guns drawn. Mr. Woods watched the activity while sitting on a porch diagonally across from the apartment, as if the drama had nothing to do with him. He surrendered when identified, convinced that he would be fine because he hadn't harmed anyone. While being interrogated later that day, he said he wouldn't shoot any officer and that he would never do anything like that. It was just in him.
All we need is that we need Governor Kay Ivey and her legal team to look. Information could be put in a courtroom so that a judge can review this information and decide whether a new
And if you look at the people who are sitting on death row, it's 2 black men.
False information that was provided in the very beginning, counsel that was not the attorneys, whether they were qualified enough to take on this case.
The judge and the jurors. A memorial plaque hangs inside the Birmingham Police Department's West Precinct building in Ensley. It depicts in bas relief the likeness of 3 police officers slayed in the line of duty: Carlos Owen, grandfather; Harley Chisholm III, former Marine; Robert Bennett, young father. Whenever their former police chief Annetta Nunn sees the memorial, she is instantly returned to that hot afternoon of June 17, 2004, to that 18th Street apartment. Bennett was the youngest, Miss Nunn said, and you know, looking in his eyes just reminds me of that day, because his eyes were partially opened when I saw him. It just brings that memory back, seeing his eyes. The tragic demise staggered Alabama. A year later, it was time to prosecute the 2 men charged with causing those. The gunman, Kerry Spencer, was convicted first. In presenting a case of self-defense, his lawyer Michael Blalock apparently raised enough doubt about what the police were doing at the apartment that the jury recommended life without parole rather than capital punishment. Mr. Blalock said that something's going on that shouldn't be going on. Bottom line, and he thought the jurors pick up on it. But Alabama at that time allowed judges to overrule jury recommendations, which Judge Tommy Nail of the Jefferson County Circuit Court did, sentencing Mr. Spencer to end. "May God have mercy on your soul," the judge said. A month later, in October 2005, Mr. Woods stood trial on the same capital slaughter charges for which Mr. Spencer had just been convicted. Robert Dunham, the executive director of the Capital Punishment Information Center, said that most people think that you can only get the capital punishment for slayings that you are responsible for, in the sense that you committed the slaying or you paid somebody to commit the slaying. But he said that the Supreme Court permitted a person to be sentenced to end if they had reckless disregard for the life of the victim and were a major participant in the underlying felony. Still, Mr. Wood's lawyer had confidence in their case. He never fired the shot. He didn't have a gun, and even the shooter. Mr. Spencer said Mr. Woods had nothing to do with the slayings. True, Mr. Woods had talked trash about the police and had challenged Officer Owen to a fight. His lawyer, Cynthia Umstead, told the jury that makes him guilty of having a big mouth and makes him guilty of stupidity for saying that, but that does not make him guilty of capital slaughter. But prosecutors challenged the premise that the shooting was unplanned by portraying Mr. Woods as a police-hating criminal who had purposely led the officers to their demise in the tied apartment. A prosecutor, Mara Searle, said they wanted them trapped, adding that Mr. Woods was the bait and Kerry Spencer was the hook. 3 officers had lost their lives because Mr. Woods refused to cooperate with a simple legitimate arrest warrant. Ms. Searle said, and under the law, he was just as culpable for their demise as the gunman. Throughout, Mr. Wood's flat expression invited interpretation. At least one white juror believed that the defendant tried to intimidate the jury with his stare, but a black alternate juror, Christina Bishop, saw only defeat. Mr. Bishop, a retired postal worker who as an alternate juror was excused before the votes on conviction and sentencing were taken, said that his demeanor was just as serious as the crime that he was being charged with. Mr. Woods was convicted of all counts, after which a couple of jurors questioned the rigor of his legal team's defense. Then came the sentencing phase, with Mr. Woods' unapologetic defiance cast in a damning light. Prosecutors presented a piece of paper taken from his prison cell on which he had written the lyrics of a rap song by Dr. Dre to include the line, "I drop pigs like Kerry Spencer." They presented a taunting letter that Mr. Woods had sent to Officer Chisholm's widow shortly after his conviction. "This is a good friend of yours." "Yes, girl, it's me, Nathaniel Woods," he began, before maintaining his innocence and saying that he didn't give a damn when she and other family members think, want, or are seeking. Prosecutors also summoned the widows of the officers to give voice to their profound loss and to assert that, as Officer Owen's wife, Bobby, put in, Mr. Woods needs the capital punishment. With the jury about to decide whether he should live or not, Mr. Woods took the stand. His lawyers had prepped him in how best to seek the jury's mercy. Miss Umstead later said, but when he got on the stand, it was like he had never heard a word. Asked by Miss Umstead whether he had anything to say to the families of the lost officers, Mr. Woods responded, "Well, I really don't have no feeling about the officers. I really didn't have anything to do with it. But if they feel they need to take my blood, then fine. If they are satisfied with that, then it's fine." His response flabbergasted one juror, Chris McAlpine, a loss recovery specialist for an Alabama utility. He recalled that that's all Mr. Woods said, and he remembered sitting there going, "You've got to be kidding me. That's the best you could come up with, knowing what you're fixing to decide." Mr. McAlpine said that if he could just shake in him and said he needed to come up with some kind of heartfelt something to give them, and that how much he wanted to. He added that if he could turn back time and do it, he would do it. Another juror, Curtis Crane, a retiree, recalled feeling the full gravity of the jury's responsibility. "You ask yourself, what gives you the right to do this?" he said. "You're just a man, just a person. What gives you the right to tell somebody else they've got to go?" This fundamental question explains why in 2005, nearly every state with a capital punishment statute required a jury to be unanimous in recommending end. At the time, only Florida, Delaware, and Alabama allowed for a non-unanimous jury recommendation of execution. Today, the practice continues only in Alabama, where 10 of a dozen jurors is considered sufficient. Deliberations were short, less than 2.5 hours, but intense. According to Mr. McAlpine, the vote came down to 10 jurors in favor of execution, and 2 jurors, both black women, opposed. They didn't offer an explanation. He said, "It was, I just can't do it."
Nathaniel not giving up, but clearly the Officer Collins, the surviving officer, has stated all that we're asking is that we have time to have this information. Ivy, to please just give him a chance to have a fair trial. He's had it hard enough to get this case as if it was a family member of yours, a son, a brother, a father, and just before making the mistake of killing an innocent man. That's something you can never take back. You can never take that back. What does that mean? Does that make, the state of Alabama a murderer? How does this system work? We need time to prove his innocence. He's done nothing wrong. Nathaniel did not have a gun. Nathaniel did not set anything up. The actual shooter was asleep at the time.
The fight to spare a life. Mr. Woods spent the next 15 years at the William C. Holman Correctional Facility, infamous for its violence and overcrowding. The state began shutting down most of the prison in early 2020, but it remains the place where Alabama's condemned live or not. In those 15 years, 32 other men on Alabama's End Row were executed. One had slayed a Montgomery police officer. Another had robbed and slaughtered a married couple. Another had taken the life of a family of 4. Each man was put to end on a Thursday, always a Thursday. In the moments before his execution, those he left behind on End Row would bang on their doors in faint hope that he might hear their clatter of solidarity. All the while, Mr. Woods' family fought to have his life spared. A succession of lawyers made a succession of desperate arguments, including that his legal representation during the trial and the appeals process had been deficient or negligent. None found purchase. As Mr. Woods swayed between hope and despair, he corresponded with his family members. He wrote poetry. He converted to Islam. He waited. Finally, on January 30, 2020, prison officials presented Mr. Woods in a 1-page document to sign. It stipulated that he was to be executed on March 5 and advised him to provide contact information for a funeral home. No similar letter has been sent to Mr. Spencer. Unlike Mr. Woods, he managed to end his life by opting for end by nitrogen hypoxia. The protocols for this untested gassing method have yet to be finalized in Alabama, the only state to approve it, which means that the man who took the lives of 3 police officers would continue to live while his unarmed associate would be put down. A month before Mr. Wood's scheduled execution, 2 unlikely advocates took up his case. Lauren Farino, 30 years old, a corporate lawyer with no experience in capital slaughter cases, and her mother, Elena Starr, 60 years old, who had recently ended her support of the capital punishment after reading the 2018 memoir of Anthony Ray Hinton, who spent 3 decades on Alabama's End Row before being exonerated. Turning Ms. Farino's kitchen into a command center, they scoured court documents, interviewed witnesses, and capitalized on the media contacts of Miss Starr's husband, Bart Starr Jr., the son of the Hall of Fame quarterback Bart Starr. Celebrities of varying fame and notoriety, including Martin Luther King III, Kim Kardashian, and the rapper T.I., were soon championing Mr. Wood's cause. Miss Farino was troubled that more people seemed to pay attention to Mr. Wood's story only when 2 affluent southern white women got involved. A person on End Row should not live or put down based on whether the right activists, politicians, and celebrities speak out on their behalf, she said. Finally, March 5, the Thursday. It was a somber day for Andrea Elders, the daughter of Officer Carlos Owen. The thought of that evening's execution did not fill her with joy, though she felt that Mr. Woods deserved his life be taken for taking the life of a father whose last words to her had been, "I love you, I'll talk to you in the morning." No one in her family was cheering, she said. It's just he broke the law and made a bad choice, and that was his punishment. At about 4 p.m., Mr. Wood said his final goodbyes to his family and disappeared behind the door. By now, corrections officials were far down their 17-page list of execution procedures. The execution team had rehearsed. The intravenous equipment had been tested. The veins of the condemned man had been checked. Miss Farino, meanwhile, was frantically trying to have the 6 p.m. execution called off, in part by persuading a relative of one of the Slade officers to ask Alabama's Governor Kay Ivey for compassion. With less than an hour to go, Kimberly Chisholm Simmons, a sister of Officer Harley Chisholm, returned her call. "He didn't slay my brother," Miss Simmons told Miss Farino, according to a recording of their call. "He was just at the wrong place at the wrong time." Miss Farino began to cry. She asked if she could get her in touch with someone at the governor's office. Would she convey that message to them? "Yes, I will," Miss Simmons said. With Miss Simmons still on the line, Miss Farino tried to reach the state of Alabama. Miss Farino finally managed to send the governor a statement from Miss Simmons that asserted Mr. Wood's innocence and included a plea, "I beg you to have mercy on him." Mercy was fleeting. After 22 minutes before the scheduled 6 p.m. execution, Justice Clarence Thomas of the U.S. Supreme Court granted a temporary stay, allowing for one more review of the case. With the end warrant expiring at midnight, the Supreme Court had 6 hours to decide Mr. Wood's fate. At 7:35, word came that Governor Ivey had decided that clemency for Mr. Woods was unwarranted. A few minutes later, the Supreme Court lifted the stay, allowing the execution to proceed. There was nothing more to do. At 8:08, a disconsolate Miss Farino sent an email to one of the lawyers who had fought for Mr. Wood's life. All it said was, "It's over, Alicia. They are executing him."
My brother had a heart of gold. When he was out, all he did was take care of people.
So do you all feel like that you all are being ignored because the victims, 3 deceased,
don't want to talk about and that they don't want to cover only because those were police officers? And if you ask people of that neighborhood, so that's the only thing that we're really worried about, is getting that information about those officers out there so they could really...
Kay Ivey would really look deep into her heart and her... all this information that everyone in the world is reading. They can read it and clearly see, for the courts to go over this information and just have the truth come out.
The final minutes. The ritual resumed. The condemned man was strapped to a gurney of white sheets and black restraints. The prison warden read aloud the end-of-life warrant, then asked whether there were any final words. No. Prison officials checked the integrity of the IV lines one last time. Then at 8:38, there began to flow a saline solution with midazolam hydrochloride, which is intended to render the condemned unconscious. The man lifted his head and shoulders as if straining to see into one of the witness galleries. He moved his lips. He held up an index finger, then his head lowered. After a few minutes, a member of the execution team stepped forward to assess the condemned man's awareness. First, by saying the man's name. Second, by stroking his eyelashes. Third, by pinching his arm. Once unconsciousness was confirmed, the rest of the chemicals began to flow through the IV lines. A muscle relaxant called rocuronium bromide and potassium chloride to include cardiac arrest. Nathaniel Woods was declared gone at 9:01 p.m. He was 43 years old. He is buried in a Muslim cemetery in Georgia, a good 50 miles from the Alabama line. Alabama's broken justice system. Wood's case is unfortunately one in a long line of executions that highlights the many problems with the Alabama justice system. Before its abolishment in 2017, Alabama allowed judges to override a unanimous jury in order to impose capital punishments. While this is a step in the right direction, Alabama was the last state in the United States to make these changes. Alabama has had 67 executions and 9 exonerations since 1976. This means that for every 7 people executed, 1 has been exonerated. As of today, at least 107 of the capital punishments in Alabama had been reversed and resulted in a reduced sentence or an exoneration. These statistics leave Alabama with a very high error rate. After 2010, Alabama executed a series of defendants with questionable convictions. 2 defendants suffering from mental illness and 3 defendants whose judges overrode the jury's decision for life imprisonment in favor of capital punishment. Alabama also has no statewide public defender system and does not pay appointed attorneys enough, resulting in a lack of quality of counsel. Until 1999, capital trial attorneys were paid $40 per hour for work in court and $20 an hour for work out court. The out-court work compensation could only reach $1,000. During this time, almost half of the current en-row convictions occurred. Now, capital trial attorneys are paid $70 per hour with a cap of $2,500. A rate that is noticeably below market rates. The lack of funding has resulted in a reduced quality of work and inadequate representation for defenders who are fighting for their lives. In January of 2020, the governor of Alabama appointed a panel to issue recommendations to address the problems of the Alabama prison system, reported in 2019 report released by the Justice Department. The report identifies the major problems with Alabama's prison system. These problems included prisoners being attacked and tortured on a routine basis with the knowledge and participation of the prison guards. Such mistreatment clearly violates the 8th Amendment, which protects against cruel and unusual punishment. It also included problems within prisons such as overcrowding, understaffing, a large presence of weapons and drugs, corruption, and raw sewage. Many corrections officers have been arrested and charged with crimes such as bribery and drug trafficking. In February of 2019, a judge found that the conditions for mentally ill patients within the prison system were unconstitutional. Since the beginning of 2019, at least 29 of 28,000 people passed away from preventable passings in the Alabama prison system. a big contrast to the national average of prison homicides, 7 per 100,000 prisoners. The recommendations provided by the state-appointed panel have been called common sense and do not address the more serious problems. If these problems are not fixed, the prison system will be operated by an outside party. That's all for this video, folks. See you next time.